get started. Call the meeting to order. Approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Mary, is there a second?
Second.
Keith? Okay, are there any corrections, amendments, revisions? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Dave Kraus abstains and Barbara abstains, I bet.
Barbara.
Because I'm telepathic.
The other side of John Wood, right, since I wasn't here.
Okay, the better side, yeah, no kidding.
I said other, I didn't say that.
He said better.
Okay. I don't see any public, so we don't need to publicly comment. Okay, let's do the budget update first. First thing I'm going to pass out is the position paper from the Association of Chief Business Officers on the governor's budget. And let's see here, I think I have another one too.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah. And then I'll also do the one from the Community College League of California. So this week's been interesting. The ACBO position is fairly clearly articulated in support of the tax initiative for November. So you can see the various different, I guess, 7 points that they approved. And it might be helpful in terms of understanding the issues and the textures of the issue. The other one, which is probably more interesting, the defining moment from Scott Lay. And what this details is that there were a number of competing ballot initiatives that were proposed for the November ballot. And what people were afraid of is that with so many competing against one another, that it would dilute the strength of a vote one way or the other, and or confuse people. So the governor and one of the groups came to an agreement. I think that the bottom line is that there's through the compromise, they're expecting, and it's actually the addition of what they call a millionaire tax, that it would bring in another $2 billion past what the governor's proposal was. So the theory is that by focusing on one ballot initiative, that there's a greater chance of passage. And then we'll talk in a minute about the, in fact, let me just do that now. The guiding principles. Similar last week. Last week we did discuss that we need to add one. So the second point under financial I added, which is in the event that the November ballot initiative passes, a plan will be in place to increase budgets as appropriate. So what that will mean is that prior to the November election, we're going to know what occurs in the event that it does pass. So is there any comment on that? Is everybody okay with it? Okay, we'll have one more meeting to where if anybody has anything else that they'd like to add to this list prior to the April the 4th board meeting, and then we'll take these to the board and get that approved too. So if anybody has any other ideas, you can email me, and for the next meeting then I'll see if I can wordsmith something. So that's okay? All right. And cleaning up from last week as well. Deal with the old stuff first. Last week I presented a proposal for discussion, the pie chart with what to do is the year-end budget reallocation. And Daniela stated that the graduation fund should be included in this process. So what I've done is I've amended this because I think it's a good idea. And again, this is for further discussion. What I did is I split the departmental discretionary projects programs, which was 10%, into two 5% pieces. So if anybody'd like to comment on this. What we're trying to do, of course, is to standardize this so that we have a process in place irrespective of the year going forward. That at the end of the year, we know what will happen to whatever money is left over, if any. Danny?
Yeah, first of all, could we get a breakdown of our the way the budget is currently allocated by these categories for this year and the last 2 years?
Yeah, but it's going to be real simple because it's 100% capital outlay.
Oh, you know what? I was thinking of something different. This is the proposal for the year-end real. I'm sorry. I was thinking of the other chart, so I want to talk about that when we get there. So, my only thought is that it's kind of interesting that 70% is still going where it used to go, and for the graduation fund, you decided to take it out of departments instead of
out of employees, which is where you want to take it out of. Like
Well, no, actually, I'm still not happy with these percentages, first of all, but because you basically got 70% still going to capital outlay and cash reserves. We're at 19 million in cash reserves as we sit. So.
Well, and I think, and what I am proposing is that we, our target should be 3 months of the expenditure side. Of course, the expenditure side is sliding backward, so it makes it somewhat easier to do. But I think that as a fiscal policy, we should have 3 months of reserves in order to handle the cash flow issues. This year, we are falling behind again, and only because the state budget is as bad as it is, and the apportionment deferral is picking up steam. So, you know, obviously in previous years, the money went 100% to capital outlay, and from time to time, not every year, the ending balance increased as well for cash flow. So this is an attempt, and what I'd also propose is that when we come to an agreement on this, that each year at about this time, that the Budget Resource Allocation Committee revisit this issue. Because this is, you know, in years past, this occurred basically after July the 1st or close to July the 1st, sometimes before, typically after, prior to the books being closed. So very often it occurred in the third week of July. Very few people were here during the third week of July, but that's when the books have to be closed after the fiscal year. So what I propose is that when we develop a procedure for this, that, you know, during this time of the year, this item always be revisited each year, and that this committee, you know, weigh in on it. Those numbers are flexible. I think that this is a reasonable starting point. I will tell you that it is not without pain to do this in terms of funding Dwayne's technology upgrade for the EIS system.
Technology upgrade. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did, as a matter of fact.
Did you hear?
Yeah.
We didn't have this problem before you arrived.
Well, so
we can fix this.
So 3 months of expenditures, what would be that amount?
Well, you know, this year, that would be a quarter of probably, I would estimate, 103 million. So it'd be about 25 million.
25, $26 million.
Somewhere in there.
Sitting in the bank.
It's my understanding that payroll is running a roughly 10 million a month.
Yeah, a little less now because of the retirements, but yeah.
I guess I was going to ask a similar question with respect to 3 months, because I think I wasn't sure of the rationale behind just 3 months, because I get a little nervous myself just in my own personal budgeting to just be able to handle 3 months, you know, so that is still slim in my view, but I'm sure you have a rationale for that.
Well, you know, this year we're expecting a $22 million apportionment deferral. Did I say 22% or million?
I don't know.
You said 22 million.
Okay, $22 million apportionment deferral. So right now we have about 18.7. So this is a matter of moving that upward. Now, 20%, And with the $2.85 million mid-year cut after the $2 million that we'd already budgeted, that 2.85 is going to come from whatever would have gone to the year-end leftover budget. So, you know, to the extent that last year was something like 3.9, well, that this year, assuming all things being equal, would leave $1 million. Okay, so that would mean $200,000 increase to cash flow, which would bring it to 18.9 off of the $22 million that we need in apportionment deferral coverage. So this is, now if it was ever $4 million, well, of course that'd be $800,000. But it would also be $800,000 for non-recurring employee compensation and benefits, which translates to probably about a 1.25% off schedule increase. Yeah, Dave, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I have a problem like with Danny with this 50% capital outlay. If we have money left over, why doesn't it go back into the general fund instead of going into, you know, until this budget gets resolved? And why are we putting it into technology where you can't touch it?
No, we can still, the board can move it back again. It's not irrevocable. So, you know, the board can move it back into the general fund. The fact is, however, it's non-recurring. The trouble that you have is, if we were to take a position that we should budget for the capital outlay as a part of the ongoing budget, the methodology to achieve that would be that we would not fully budget all employees. As I mentioned the last time, in a similar way that the airlines book seats. You would assume that not everybody is going to be here at the end of the year. So the airline can book, you know, 105% of their seats, knowing that certain people aren't going to show up, and then you'll fly your plane full. We can do something similar with the budget. So we could, you know, give everybody 95% of whatever your salary requirements are for the year, knowing that by the end of the year, not everybody's going to be here. But our traditional, and it's occurred here forever, is we fully budget every employee who is here for the whole year. Okay, so at the end of the year, what occurs is not everybody's here. There's money that is left over, and then that's how we fund these one-time projects. There are only two choices, I think, is to budget for the project out of the ongoing regular expenses, or to wait and see how it turns out at the end of the year and then fund it. Is that clear?
Well, kind of, but like I said, the 50% outlay, like I said, if it's $4 million, that means $2 million is going into capital outlay. Mm-hmm. I think it'd be better served going into the general budget in case that we do have a $5 million cut next year. It's really $3 million that you really have for that 1 year anyway, that you would have to account for.
Now, the other thing that you'll see is scheduled maintenance. Scheduled maintenance, when the state pays for it, is a 1-to-1 match. They give you $1 for every dollar you put into it. Instructional equipment actually is funded the same way, only it's a 3-to-1 match. But to do like a roof repair, that's a scheduled maintenance project. And what you have to do is you have to put in $1 for each dollar the state will give you. For the past 3 years, the state hasn't given us a nickel. That means that there has to be money for this stuff, because to the extent that we don't, we end up causing all manner of havoc around here. You actually have to set aside money for one-time projects, one way or another. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned, by the way, I totally agree with Dave, but on the other point, the 3-to-1 ratio was for what was
instructional equipment.
Instructional equipment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Those are things that require district matches.
But my concern, like Dave, is that the whole rationale that's used is once the money at the end of the year is moved into any one of these accounts, it's now one-time money. If you rolled it over, if you rolled it over into the budget, it's recurring money. It stays in your general fund, and it's recurring money. It's not for that year, but it's what you do is you get it into these pockets where you then say, well, we can't use that for this because it's non-recurring, and yet it came from recurring money. And so you're recategorizing large sums of money at the end of the year every year, and that's the frustration. I mean, there's $4.4 million sitting in a property acquisition fund as we sit.
Right.
In the middle of this crisis, why do we have $4.4 million sitting in a property acquisition fund? And I'll get into that later. But anyway, this is my concern with the outlay of this and the idea that, again, 70% is basically going where it always was into your cash reserves. We've got $19 million in cash reserves. 3 months expenditures, that's assuming you don't get $1 from the state. I don't know. It doesn't seem. I appreciate the effort to move in a different direction here, but I think the movement is so slight that it's.
Well, but the movement isn't slight. There's a 50% movement from how we have done it, but we have to face up. And let me just address some of the issues. The non-recurring occurs, and by definition, it means that your recurring money is the revenue that you receive. What you try to do in proper budget methodology is you match your revenues with your expenses. Okay, the revenues are ongoing, and the expenses, therefore, should be the ongoing expenses. What happens at the end of the year when you have money left over, it is by definition not recurring because you have no guarantee it will occur again the following year. Okay, but I come back to the point that I made with Dave earlier, is we can do away with this. What we'll do is we will budget several $1 million for the projects that have to be funded. The way that we'll do that is there will be a budget reduction for operations. And then what you hope for is at the end of the year that you've hit the number on target. That is the alternative way of doing this. This is by far the safer way of doing it because we don't fund a project if we don't have the money. But it doesn't mean that we have a choice in the project. For accreditation, we have promised upgrades. We know that the system is about to fall apart. And this discussion can become very academic very quickly if the system collapses this afternoon, which it could, and nobody can register and nothing can occur. Is that not true, Dwayne?
Yes, and my resume's up to date, too. So.
Fact is that this thing is on life support. We have to fund it. Now, if we picture what happens to the students, if they can't register for classes, they can't pay, we can't do anything. The entire system of the college collapses very quickly. And the fact that we've lasted as long as we have with the 1982 system is remarkable. The fact that Santa Rosa is still breathing at all is amazing. Is that not true, Dwayne?
Yes.
I don't think anybody here is suggesting that we're not funding the AIS system.
Well,
okay,
but we're several $1 million short.
But there's $7 million sitting in an account currently, right now. Okay,
yes.
So under his scenario, one of them was in the first year you'd spend between $3 and $6 million. Okay, so that's not even the total amount in there if we went to the maximum amount. There's also another $3 million sitting in another account, which, again, I'm not complaining about your I'm just trying
Mine.
to... No. Your department. I'm not... It's nothing against you personally, but...
No. Wait, there's a reason why no one's sitting next to you.
I'm figuring it out.
But as was brought up at the AS meeting, there were like 4 programs. One was the virtual labs. One was the laptops for the faculty. The smart classrooms was one, and then the AIS system. So the AIS system I totally understand. The other 3 seem to be, and I think it was Dan Haley who basically referred to them as sort of luxury items that aren't absolutely necessary. We're in the middle of a crisis. We are being cut millions of dollars. We're cutting sections, opportunities for students to go to school. That's what we're here for. So to be doing all those things, and I'm not saying we can't do it at all, but maybe we could downgrade it a little bit. We've got $3 million in a technology upgrade plan for this year. $3 million plus the $7 million that is in there for the ERP system. That's $10 million. That's almost the full cost. He said, I believe Dr. Cable said it was about $11 million over 5 years. Well, we've got $10 million sitting right in there. Now, I'm not saying to take that whole amount out, But I'm just saying, let's look at some of these numbers and kind of figure out. I don't know, and I was going to ask if we could get roughly a price of what the laptops, the virtual computers, and the smart classrooms, what those cost. I know the ERP system, it's about $11 million over 5 years.
If all faculty need and want laptops, it's around $930,000. A number of faculty already have laptops and docking stations, so they wouldn't necessarily need that. It's just the budget.
Right.
It also included about 250 laptops for adjunct faculty that could be checked out or loaned. That's for the laptop portion of that. For the classrooms, which would be Measure P funds, but is roughly $2 million. And
Okay,
again,
but that's coming out of Measure P funds?
That's what we're going to try for.
that's what we're going to try.
Okay,
Right.
and I'm sorry, what was the amount?
2,
2 million.
yes.
Now, Dwayne, the AIS system, if we can implement it in 18 months, then the expenses occur in 18 months?
The faster we implement the various modules of the system, the faster those costs would accumulate. So yes.
And
From
also,
a cash flow perspective, that would be sooner as opposed to later.
I'm sorry.
As I gave those costs in previous discussions, it was based on a traditional implementation. And that traditional implementation is 36 months to 4 years, essentially. So,
And isn't it true that the faster we implement, the greater the cost?
yes.
So we're going to incur additional costs because it requires the vendor to do a lot more work in order to help us implement faster.
Right.
So the cost of the EIS will increase accordingly in order, because we have this emergency situation now. We've got to get it up and going.
That's correct. And once we see the financial proposals by the 3 vendors that we're having to come and do demonstrations, then the better that we'll understand what the picture, the cost picture will be. And then that could be a separate discussion that certainly could come to whatever venue that Rick deems appropriate to discuss those, okay? But you're right. I mean, the faster we need to implement means more resources. It's not unlike you requesting services from ITS. If you want it, we can deliver that in a month, but if you want it faster, you're going to ask me numbers, and I don't know.
Okay.
I cannot tell you that. I'm getting
You know, we keep
concerned
hearing
about
from-
being on record with certain numbers.
Yeah, once the system is installed, there's going to be a maintenance cost, is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you know about how much the maintenance cost is per year?
Approximately $500,000 a year.
Now, I don't want this discussion to just be between the unions, because we have managers and we have the students and we have,
You know, I think the fundamental issue here is really not about the particular projects and whether we support or don't support projects, because I do think there's a lot of support across the institution for a lot of things that we need to do. In fact, these projects are your projects, not Dwayne's projects. And but I think part of it really has to do with process and how we go about. I think as we start figuring out how we're going to do institutional planning, and we take that planning process and the prioritization of that planning process, and then we link it to our budgets, I think that's going to be how we determine what gets done and what doesn't get done, and to what extent we do any particular project in a given year. But I thought the whole concept of this was really more about the principles, the guiding principles in terms of how we would look at allocating resources. Doesn't mean that there's hard lines in between any of that, and all of that can be very flexible. So that's what I really thought the whole issue was about.
Well,
I'm sorry to change the subject a little bit here, but I just want to pass along a concern from the last academic senate meeting. Don't get me wrong. I mean, people certainly would like a extra compensation and benefits, but there was some concern about the optics in the community when classes are being cut, that faculty, staff, and management are getting extra compensation at the end of a year.
well, but you know, the issue is that the cost of living in Los Angeles area keeps going up.
Right.
Okay, and statutorily, employees are in line for COLAs. that the legislature continually unfunds or doesn't even consider funding. And if you were to go back 5 years, that is probably, and does anybody know what the real percentage is of the unfunded COLAs? Because it's probably on the order of 15%. Okay, so the issue is that this represents, I think, probably if it's $1 million. No, sorry. If it's, because earlier I think I said $700,000 or $800,000. I think that for every percent it will cost something like $600,000. So when you start to do that math, you're into $9 million worth of backed up. Now, this is non-recurring because it's a non-recurring source of money. But the fact is that I think that it would be unfair to assume that this is, you know, a bonus to people that is in any way unwarranted. Furthermore, I also believe that to the extent that employees pitch in and help out, that we ought to allow people to benefit from that. And I think that it's just good financial planning to allow people, to the extent that we save money, for them to be able to be helped in their own current situation. You know, and you're talking about all employees here, and not all employees are making $100,000 a year. So I just think it's an unfair concept, and I think that that's easily explainable to anyone who should ask that, you know, we don't get COLAs. And
Well,
you know, just look at what's happening to gasoline lately. Okay, everybody's paying more money, so it's not like what we're doing is we're trying to blow money in an unjustifiable manner.
Well, we've had a lot of folks retire. We've had a lot of folks leave. I think there's probably not any of us in this room that isn't taking on more as part of that. And I think it's important that we recognize that, where indeed folks are having to take on more duties all the way down to the front lines. And so I think it's important that you set aside dollars for that.
I think if I could just say, in terms of, I appreciate the academic senate's cognizance of how this may be viewed by the community, and considering that this would benefit faculty as well, I appreciate their willingness to say, well, should we do this anyway? I would say I think it is easily explainable to the community that this isn't a bonus, this isn't a, here we like you, here's more money. It's more of a, you guys have been working hard, you are being compensated for that hard work. Especially in times where like's been said already, everyone's taking on more responsibility. Now, in terms of the capital outlay, here that's 50%. I think perhaps if we can get a breakdown on how that money's been, what capital outlay money has been used in the past, it may perhaps alleviate some concerns here, because I think I can understand for some at the table we're seeing it's 50%, it seems, well, it's still 50%, and I know that it's not going 50% to just one thing. It is across various projects, so perhaps getting a clarification on that may help here.
I can show where that money has gone in like the previous 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I can do that. Danny?
Yeah, well, I agree with Dwayne as far as the priorities, and that is my point is, you know, when I started looking into the budget a little bit, to have $4.4 million sitting in a property acquisition fund when we have an AIS system that is about to collapse, I think we should use some of that money to make sure that thing does happen in 18 months. But we've got $7 million. There's another $4 million. I'm not saying even to take it all out of there, but I mean, to have money sitting in a fund for property acquisition when we're going through the situation we're going in, to me, the priorities just seem to be, we've got $100,000 for a multi-purpose field on parking lot 5A. That's never going to happen, that we're now putting the new science village on. I mean, things like that, if you start going through the budget, there's money there, and that's one-time money for one-time projects other than the ongoing maintenance. Rather than taking money out of our ongoing money, our recurring money, let's use some of the one-time money for the one-time projects, and that leaves more available in the recurring money, and that's all I'm trying to say.
I agree with almost everything you said, but it does not leave more money in the recurring funds. The definition of recurring is that next year you can expect that same money. Okay, and in this case, that is simply not the way that it works. Next year, we're going to be even in worse pain.
Well,
It is non-recurring funds, Bob.
and maybe the analogy is, last year we used 1.3 million of the dental fund in
Yes.
order to balance the budget. If this year we use 1.3 million of the property fund, we'd have to find that 1.3 million again. In other words, this year we've got to find the 1.3 million that we spent last year, right?
Well, and one of the board principles is, and frankly, we adopted it too, but it's important to the board, is that we will not be doing these smoke and mirrors that we did last year, that I proposed last year, which is, like you mentioned, the 1.3 out of the dental fund. That is an unsustainable deal, and it doesn't actually get to the heart of what the issue is.
'Cause we have to find
There are actually ways of balancing the budget through structural change. Now, in terms of what the board can do, the board can certainly move money. But it's the board who approves where the money in the capital outlay fund goes. And the answer is that we also use that money for our cash flow purposes. Our credit rating, by the way, is also predicated on that, which helps the property owners of the district. So when our credit rating went up to AA plus, it's because our finances were solid, and that saved the members of the public a tremendous amount of property taxes for Measure P. Bob, and I also want to hear from managers and from classified senate.
You know, I understand the property thing, and it's very tempting, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. But I also know that from the educational master plan process and what have you, the community, particularly in the southeast part of our district, you know, the El Monte area, whatever, they really would like to have some type of a satellite operation out there at some point. You know, that fund is there for all kinds of reasons, and that's something. Now, whether we ever did that or not, I have no idea, but
now, in the middle of this?
I know. The point is, I guess my point is, I would like to make sure we try to pay that money back when times get better and replenish that fund, is my point.
I have no
I mean,
doubt
I hear
that
where
would
you're coming
happen.
from, Dan. Yeah.
Managers?
I really don't understand enough about how it's all allocated and then divided. I look at the capital outlay and I thought that it made absolute sense for me. I need Dwayne's. If we're going to give ownership to him completely. You know, my entire division is so heavily technology based, and just from a personal, experience, even just today, I tried to put a CD in the dinosaur of a computer that you also graciously gave me when I came on board as dean, and it doesn't read them. I couldn't work on it. I still can't open documents. I wind up spending so much time trying to work, and that's just one little bee in the whole hive. Imagine what it does when faculty are trying to work with, in my division, virtual simulators. As we lose clinical space, and this is something that we're in very big competition now with. 4-year programs, we are in competition for the clinical placement sites for our students to get training, not just in nursing, but in rad tech and some of our dental clinics. And so what we're being allowed to do is use actual simulations as those kind of supplemental clinical experiences, and so the boards are approving that. Those are high tech, not high touch kinds of equipment, and I already have a laundry list, many arms lengths long of the equipment that I need. The dental programs right now are working with equipment that is so antiquated, I don't think many of the dentists in the area would recognize what our students are working with. I mean, we've had to replace vacuum systems. We've been cited for, dust issues, with filters, and the state doesn't pay for any of that. The state doesn't pay for any of our accreditation requirements. All 9 of my programs, I pay, between $1,000 and $3,000 every single year for those certification from the board's fees and usually have to play the shell game taking it out of supplies. Then I have to find someplace else to buy the supplies from because our students have supplies that are all disposable. So I can't even charge a lab fee to my students because they can't, well, they could take home the contaminated gloves that were in somebody's mouth, but do I want them to? No. So, I look at this capital outlay and I see technology and I see scheduled maintenance. I probably have an awful lot of equipment that sucks up a lot of that money. And I'm happy to know that it's actually in there so that when I make the request, to have X machine replaced or upgraded or repaired, Rick says, yeah, Barb, schedule it. I need that. My students need that. I won't be able to have them have the education that they need without that kind of earmarked money. I don't know if any of my projects are listed in there. I certainly hope so after that spiel.
I think other managers probably agree that having opportunities to have other distributions available just in addition to the capital outlays. Clearly we have a lot of needs. The technology is, as we hear almost daily, that it struggles to do its job. I'm a little concerned about the cash flow reserve issues and the 3 months. If this were personal finance, they wouldn't recommend just 3 months. Is pretty shy. They usually recommend 6 months, but here we're talking about a lot of cash. So just to have in case things. But the fact that we are now considering other parts that are also needing attention, that's I think is a real good sign. It's a tough call about the compensation stuff. I think the employees do work very hard, and you hear it every day. They're struggling, and I think that some kind of acknowledgement of that, 20% might be of this, whatever is left, could be just enough to, say thanks, and let's just keep on going forward, instead of the sense of discouragement that might may be facing as they go forward. So I think the managers probably largely agree to looking at it this way.
Gary?
For the most part, I agree with the principles of this. I do agree with Alex that it'll be easier to swallow if it was just kind of broken down to kind of support with the 50%. And as everyone else said here, and I've worked with Dwayne, and I've been here for 25 years, and even when I was here, Santa Rosa was around. And so, it could happen tomorrow, and if it happens tomorrow, this don't mean anything, so we got to do something, and wherever we can to try to find money to get that actually, that's our revenue source right there, because if we can't get students in, we can't get students to register on time and get them issued their financial aid checks or whatever. If we can't do that, we might as well go out of business. So it's just something we got to do. But like I said, I do agree with the most part of what everyone is saying. I think it will be easier to swallow once it's broken down a little more in detail.
All right, so next week I'll bring back the last 3 years and show where that money's going.
And I'd just like to say, just on the overall guidance of this pie chart, I think what you said earlier is exactly what I would say, which is this is a starting point, and I think it is much an improvement over other years. I like seeing the graduation fund added here. In terms of the cash flow, is it my understanding that part of the independent auditor has recommended that we increase our cash flow? 2, the state comptroller's office has told us that they will be deferring very, very, very large sums of money throughout the year, this coming year, more so than they have in the past.
Well, because the state almost went insolvent in March, and it was through the deferrals again. They do 2 kinds of deferrals. They do inter-year and intra-year deferrals. So what they'll do is they'll take your February apportionment and decide that they'll give it to you in April. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to delay paying for it for their own expenses. The trouble is that we end up having to loan them our money interest-free. That's where the problem lies. And they've promised that they're going to take $22 million of our 18.7. And many districts are not in the shape that we are, which means, And in fact, today, or yesterday, Marie sent me a thing about the LA County Trans, the tax and revenue anticipation note, where many districts, and this is somewhat similar to a payday loan. Now, I'm not going to say that the interest rates are nearly as bad as that, but what you're doing is you're borrowing money against your future revenue stream. The trouble is it's costing you money to do it. So we did it 1 year for $10 million, but it cost us almost $200,000 to do it. Okay, well, there's another 200 grand that we don't have. So next week I will bring back, I'll bring back more documentation.
Could you also, this independent audit that recommended we have more cash on hand, could we get a copy of that?
I think it's probably on the web already.
All right.
It's the VTD audit.
All right, just send me an email or
And I
something.
think it's
direct.
It was on the board packet.
Might be note 15, because there's a note in the audit, but I think it's note 12 or note 15, somewhere in there. Before I forget to, because I didn't write this down, I'll also say that we just got notification from PERS that our PERS rate is going to increase by 1.2% of payroll. That's of gross payroll. So something else we have to take into account, my rough calculation is that'll cost us about $250,000. Now, STRS requires legislative action, and so far the legislature hasn't acted to raise the rates, but with PERS for the classified side is 1.2%. Okay, so what I just handed out was the update of what I did last week. The sections, so last week I said 12 sections, now it's 14 sections. Last week I said it was $50,000, and I think the rough number today is $54,000, and last week I said 430 new enrollments, and the number is 480 seats available. So Bob, do you want to?
Yeah, basically what Rick is talking about, this is the spring forward intercession. So these 14 sections represent the spring forward intercession. They're based on analysis of the needs of the students that were impacted, the 428 students, and as we look towards this, the completion agenda. The 14 sections that are being mounted are sections that support the needs of these students and support the needs of others that will be hopefully graduating in June. They include such courses as Physiology 10, Biology 16, Speech 1, History 7A, Poli-Sci 1, Psych 1, English 1A, English 900, and a few others that are all of the lower division transfer, general education transfer type courses. The numbers that you see there, the average enrollment in each one of these 14 sections is 34 students. Schedule mid-range, a BA plus 36 or master's plus 17 or what have you, and it's sort of the C range. It's a little over $65 an hour. The indication of plus or minus is because obviously there'll be some people a little bit less than that and some people a little higher than that depending upon who's selected to teach the courses. But again, it's this notion of basically 45 sections versus 14, where we are serving more students in the 14 sections with the 34 student per average, as opposed to what we did before, where we averaged 9.5 students per the 45 that we canceled for the spring semester. So I think that pretty much sums it up. And this is pretty much the story at this point.
When does it start?
March 26th, I think.
26th.
March 26th.
And concludes at commencement.
Beg pardon?
It concludes at commencement.
It's a 12-week intercession, so it concludes at the end of the semester. And then these are all, if you will, at zero limit right now, and we are literally hand placing students in these sections that are identified by the counseling and the admissions and record staff.
Dan?
Mark Rocha was quoted in the Pasadena Sun today saying that if an student came in an area student came in by April 1, they'd be guaranteed their classes. Is that the case?
I don't want to speak to that because I haven't seen it, but I think in general, though, Ed and I could generally respond this way, which is the Enrollment Management Committee is working through a revised enrollment priorities policy, and that policy will go to the College Council and then presumably further on which will speak to the enrollment priorities of all students going forward. I don't know what that reference was to the April 1st date.
Yeah, I don't recognize the date that was given in purpose. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
That was the proposal.
Yeah. Well, you know how
Don't believe
papers are.
everything
I was
you
just
read
going to say,
in
you know how papers are, right? Anyway, but I do know we've got a good process going through enrollment management right now. But both President Martinez and I are very comfortable with the process, so I think we're making progress.
Okay? Sorry, Jane.
Yeah, I'm sorry, on this one, what was option one? Was that also the spring?
Option one was also the spring. That was the 45 sections that were cut.
Oh, that were cut?
Those were the 45 cut sections, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Alex?
May I ask, just as a general question, have we been able to identify all the students that were affected and communicate to them, or just a majority of them?
Well, what I can tell you is that Betsy and Homa, the people who do our transfer checks or our grad checks, I guess, went through all 428. The counseling staff went through all 428, and in some form or another, they are all being touched or contacted.
Okay.
And as you recall, Dr. Bell reported, who's in Sacramento today, by the way, which is why he's not here. Dr. Bell reported that he sent an email to everyone individually and contacted them all and made reference to it. So I think in one form or another, they are being touched. If for some reason they haven't, they should get in touch with either Dr. Bell or me, and we'll make sure they get taken care of.
Perfect. I would like thank you and Dr. Bell, who's
bet.
not here, for that hard work on this project.
You bet. Thank you.
David?
One more question. If a student doesn't want to take the class, would that open it up for somebody else?
Yeah, the way this works is that it's a completion agenda, spring forward intercession. So the first call are on those 428 who are within striking distance of leaving us by transfer or degree or certificate in June. The next level is other students who are in striking distance of completing their goals. And then we go back to the 428 after that. Again, it's really about pushing this completion agenda and helping students to move out of here. So every one of the 34 students in each one of these sections are going to be there for a very specific purpose of helping them to move on in their academic careers.
Okay. Last time we talked about F1 visa student enrollment, and maybe I should have done this slightly differently, but Dr. Bell had sent me this, and of course he couldn't be here, but just so that we're clear, when it says 2007 to the present, fall plus spring, what that does is it takes the number of international students here in the fall, and it takes the number who are here in the spring, and it adds those two numbers together. So it means that there are a bunch of duplicates, but if you're comparing year on year, it's a fair comparison.
But it wouldn't matter as far as revenues, because if they're taking 12, aren't they required to take 12 units? So if they're taking 12 in one semester and taking 12, this is how many students are taking 12 units.
Yeah, but the deceptive part could be, for instance, you can't really say there are 2,144 internationals here at the moment. There's like half of that or some fraction.
Yeah, okay.
Together it's that.
But as far as revenue, you could say there's 2,144 students that took 12 units
Times
at
12 times $218.
Right.
All right, that's all. I mean, no. Sorry, were you going to go on?
No, I was just going to, oh, sorry.
So, yeah, there are approximately 1,000 F1 visa students.
At any one time.
Yeah, I actually believe the number this spring is 1,146. I think I just saw an email that said 1,146.
Yeah, that's because of trying to get this data together.
You're right.
But what it meant was the fall could have been somewhat smaller.
Exactly.
It might have been 1,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So year on year, I think the comparison is a fair one in showing what the trend line is. And the other thing I did want to point out is that, and I kind of made it bleed out on that far column, but if it got to 6,000, that would mean, roughly 3,000 actual people here. And for each 1,000 people, it is about $5 million net. So to have 3,000 people here would be about $15 million net. When you're talking about resolving a budget issue next year of $6.5 million, it starts to show you the magnitude of what can occur.
Right. which is why I was interested in this.
Which is why everybody's interested.
The out-of-state, this doesn't include out-of-state.
No, this is F1.
So do we have the numbers for that?
Well, I don't, but again, I can ask Dr. Bell.
Okay.
If he has that. Somehow, we probably do have that
Yeah,
somewhere.
and I think this topic came up, and I think they're working on that right now.
Okay.
Because I asked it as well.
So what would be helpful is the number of students and then average how many sections they take. Because if you're trying to figure out how much revenue it's going to create, it doesn't matter.
How many
They're
units?
I mean, with the
How many
visa
units,
How many right.
students, sorry, units.
Yeah.
Because with the F1 students, they have to take 12, so they're
Right.
taking at least 12. In fact, some of them probably take more.
Right.
So do we know what the average number of credits that they're taking?
I do not.
Okay. Could we get that too?
Yeah, I think we can work that through. We'll just make a note of that. Yeah, we'll work on it.
Do out-of-state students also pay the?
Yes, $218.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just a question, the Santa Monica announced that they're going.
And I'm going to get to that in a minute.
Oh, okay. It's comparable that it's a revenue generating idea.
So,
The next item on the list.
Oh, I should look at the agenda?
No,
since
it's not on there.
You mentioned last time that Santa Monica charges $275 and we only charge $218
Yeah.
per unit for that. Now, I did some looking into it. Are we past the deadline for changing that fee for next year?
Yeah, I kind of do want to talk about Santa Monica in a minute.
All right.
Is there anything else, because it is the next item, is there anything else on the F1? No? Let me just pass this out, because I'd like to have a broader conversation about Santa Monica. And I'll pass out two different things here. One is an article from the LA Times, and the other, Cindy found both of these, is an editorial in the Times. LA Times? So this is an article in the LA Times plus an editorial in the LA Times. So just by way of backdrop, Santa Monica has just approved a plan whereby they create a two-tier system of sections. The first one is the regular 36, which will become $46 per unit section. The second is a $200 per unit section. The theory is that if you charge $200 a unit, you can offer anything you want. And in fact, it helps to subsidize people who can't afford the $200, because if you're going to have 30 people in a section, 3-unit section times 600, that's $18,000. You might end up paying, $6,000, $7,000, whatever, $4,000 to the faculty member, at which point you can actually take that money and offer additional sections at the regular rate. Because, of course, in general, you lose money for every student that you're teaching, which is why you get the state compensation. So it's an interesting approach that Santa Monica has just taken this week. It creates, on the one hand, cash. On the opposite side of the same coin, it creates a social problem. It creates a social equity problem. And I don't have a position on it. I don't know. I'm just bringing it up because it's in the news this week as Santa Monica's methodology to start dealing with this problem. So what it means is that if you've got cash, you get whatever you want. And if you don't, you're going to stand in line. And from a social equity point of view, there would be people who object to that. But as I pointed out, it's also possible to subsidize and to offer additional enrollments with the money that's left over.
There was a guarded statement made by a chancellor's office person I read in one of these articles saying they're not sure if this is legal or not. So I assume someone is looking into it up at the chancellor's office.
Well, I'm also sure that Santa Monica checked with their attorneys.
Yeah. So it's really a question of who interprets the law. But I guess I guess as they bring it in under their foundation, I guess that must be part of their thinking that it can get around the law. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is there. But there is a question of legality, I guess. It's still trying to be figured out.
Well, we were close last year to getting extension to be able to offer sections at the going rate. Okay, See, part of the challenge that you have is that there are people in the community who would like to take classes at PCC, but maybe it's a life drawing class, okay, because they have an interest in that. And then they come and they take a seat, but the problem is they're taking a seat away from a student who really needs that course. So the idea was that if you could offer, on weekends or whatever to the community, to where we're a community college and we can still serve them, but the state shouldn't be subsidizing that. Therefore, you got to pay full freight. And to the extent then that you're paying full freight, you're subsidizing the students who are here in order to get their education. So, it's an interesting thing in terms of extension, and somehow or other at the last minute that thing got yanked in Sacramento. But it would have been helpful to have that passed, because it would have given us another option to both serve the community and earn additional revenue.
That's right.
And I think Dave had his hand up, and then Alex.
On this one, when I saw it come through, they were saying that this can create a have and have-not system.
Yeah.
If you got enough money, you can make it through the junior community college within 2 years. And then the people who don't have it are lagging behind. The other thing, too, they were saying is, okay, are you now becoming a private college because you are now charging a private admission? And if not, does that extra money above the $46 that they're charging go back to the state? That was another issue that they were looking at. So, and then the college would not get the money anyway.
Let me do Alex, and then Ed, and then Kent.
I would preface my comments by saying, one, had that assembly bill about extension programs passed, I would personally benefit from that, and I will preface this statement by saying my mother is an educator herself. As the Vice President for External Affairs for the Association of Students last year, as part of the lobby committee, I know that when I looked at the assembly bill, my main concern is kind of what Santa Monica has now done, and Santa Monica, it was their representative that proposed it, and it was their administration that was working very closely with that assembly person to craft that language. And my concern was always this: the idea of English classes, math classes being offered, classes that day-to-day students need to transfer. I have no problem if this district or any other district decided to do something like a drawing class that perhaps isn't necessarily necessary for transfer, offered to the community at the going rate. I think that's perfectly fine and fair, at least during this fiscal crisis. But I do not think that we should move in the direction of having our English classes and our math classes in that same way, because I fear of what it says about our education system here in California, about becoming a have and have not system.
Ed, and then Kent.
I can tell you that this topic, the creation of this two-tiered system, was widely discussed, has been widely discussed in the statewide academic senate, with both sides arguing vociferously. And I don't remember that it was settled in any resolution or anything of that sort. I can tell you personally that I would be very concerned with this sort of endeavor going forward here, because we're talking not about extra classes, like, well, from the artistic point of view, drawing would not be extra, but we're talking about the core curriculum here, actually. And 2 or 3 years ago, we PCC were approached by Kaplan University. They offered to teach some of our core business classes and several others at their rate. But if we articulated those courses, then they would be transferred back to PCC and students would still get credit. I rejected that offer at that time because, in my opinion, that was the abandonment of our mission. And so I would be very, very reluctant to go down this path with on our own or with with a collaborator.
Thank you. Kent?
Students who participated in the Santa Monica model through the $600 per 3-unit course, that would be outside of the state system, so they wouldn't charge FTS against. I mean, they wouldn't earn it FTS.
Correct. That's right.
So it'd be a standalone, it's kind of a small college in that. Yeah.
It's a de facto separate college.
So they're not taking any money away from
Correct.
They're actually adding quite a
Yes.
bit more to it. So there's really, it's not a competition between say, a student who has this much money and a student who has even more money. It's just like attending a private school or something like that.
Danny?
Yeah, I don't know enough about this thing to go one way or the other whether I would support it or not, but I think the whole idea for F1 students, for out-of-state students that pay the out-of-state fee, and for a two-tier system, if you had a system where there was a lockbox on a large percentage of that money that was required to be reinvested into other classes that would be offered, and therefore the people that can afford it are paying for those classes, and yet what they're producing is, you can't take it and put it into capital outlay or into the cash reserves, maybe a small percentage of it, but 80-90% of that money is then rolled over, and you create more sections. It actually helps the local community by being able to offer more communities, but you would have to have some kind of a clear lockbox on that money so that people would know you're not taking that money away to do other things that wouldn't benefit the local community. Because otherwise, it's the same thing with the foreign student F1 visa students. Local students say, well, then they're going to take all my spots. But if you show them that, look, this is how much money, and this is how many more sections we created, therefore it's opening up spots for you, I think it would be sellable.
And you raise a good point, because we really do already have a two-tier system. We've got the F1 and the out-of-state system. You can't tell if a student sitting beside you is paying $218 a unit or $36 a unit. So it is true that we already have a two-tier system. The question is whether that two-tier system expands to not just out-of-state people, but people with money. So it is kind of an expansion of what we've already got. It is an interesting concept, and Danny's exactly correct that to the extent that you get extra money, you can help in-state students with that extra money. The trouble is that at a certain point, you're also going to be, it is possible to say, okay, in that case, we're going to be yanking other classes because we need to juice up the revenue, right? That's also possible to do.
I suppose somebody can do that, but I mean, you have clear rules where you just say, look, the principle
I'm not saying
is,
we would do that.
Yeah, no, of course not. but I mean, you lay out some kind of a plan where you say that, we will be able to demonstrate that we're not in any way impeding on what's currently being offered, and we're actually going to offer more.
I think that what's going to be interesting, the legislature will have to weigh in. The trouble is the legislature's not funding this properly. At a certain point, they can't talk out of both sides of their mouth, because what do? You can't leave all the students in the lurch, and therefore people like Santa Monica are getting creative with it. Well, if they're getting creative in order to serve the students, then you have one of two choices. Either fund it properly and restrict doing things like this, or don't fund it properly and loosen up on the reins. Dave?
Yeah, that for the classroom, you have a person would be F1 and a regular district person. If you go to, like, say, 3,000 per semester, does that mean 3,000 less students from the community will be able to apply?
No.
Are you going
to? And that's precisely the point that Danny was just making. Is what you're doing is for 3,000 students, you would be. Well, let me just do the math here real quick.
15 minutes.
It's got to be $21 million or something like that, because I think it's $7 million gross, and I think we net 5. So for the sake of the discussion, you'd be, and maybe the number's wrong, but again, for the sake of the discussion, if you get another $21 million into our coffers, then the question is, what can we do with that $21 million in terms of enrollment expansion? That enrollment expansion takes place for in-district students. It's true that you're paying for the F1 visa student. They're the ones, though, who are funding 2 or 3 other students and subsidizing them is the net effect of how it really works. Dan?
I think this is a very slippery slope. I see David's contention that you'll take that money and make other classes open. But the people who are paying that are going to say, wait a minute, if I'm paying that money, why don't you open that class up for me so I can get into that class? And I don't think the precedents of the out-of-state and the F1 students are applicable here. They're paying extra because their parents, their family, did not pay into state coffers to fund this school. So that's why we're saying, okay, you didn't pay any taxes, so you've got to pay tuition here. That's the dividing line. This one is slightly right over that line.
No, and, you know, I haven't taken a position. The point is that it's in the news. We are the Budget and Resource Allocation Committee, and it's a point that we will need to talk about. Now, I do want to come back because Danny wanted to talk about the rate, and I said I want to talk about Santa Monica. Santa Monica charges something like $270 per unit. We charge $218 for out-of-state students. And when we went through the analysis, what you'll see is Santa Monica's on the high side. We tend to be kind of in the middle. But the problem is that Santa Monica actually tends to poach our students. And they can do it for several reasons. In the first place, one of the key components is housing. And Santa Monica goes to lengths to assist students in finding housing, and Pasadena area is more difficult. The second big thing is that Santa Monica has the beach, which students tend to find rather attractive. So we have a
And they're damn attractive too.
They are. Pasadena Beach.
Come on.
So much fun as well.
Pull some sand in.
So in setting the rate, what we've tried to do is to try to be as competitive as possible in order to encourage people. The other part of the equation is that once we get this running properly, what happens is that the students here have friends, they have brothers and they have sisters and so on and so forth, and through the communication link you end up increasing your F1 enrollment. And it's a matter of trying to find a fine line here that doesn't undercut ourselves by setting the rate too high, where you earn brief money in the short run, but your overall number diminishes. So truly it's an art form, and yes, we can revisit it. And I think that from now on we should probably, when it comes to the time to address that, we should probably do it here. Is that all right?
Yeah, I mean, because again, I just ran numbers that they were about half of what you were saying, and it would have made a difference of $500,000 a year to raise it like $35 a unit. So with twice that, you're talking $1 million a year of income.
Yeah, we're working with developers to try to create housing here. Two specific properties are the Ford property and the Davis Lumber property. And it's possible, we've spoken with both, well, with parties who are interested in both parcels. Because, of course, the second issue with housing is transportation. And in both of those cases, they can walk to the campus. And so we're trying to develop that as much as we can. But Pasadena is a difficult market in terms of housing.
Just one other quick question on the out-of-state. Do they have priority registration because they pay the higher fee?
No, I don't think they do. No.
No? Okay.
One of the pities, by the way, is that returning veterans who are not in-state pay out-of-state rates, which seems like a travesty to me.
Is that a state rule or is that our local?
Pardon?
Is that a state rule?
That's just the rule. If you're out of state, you're out of state.
They should change that.
Would Caltech have any housing that we could use?
Well, we've looked at Caltech as well, and Caltech students, if they're anything, they're creative, and they tend to go for those too. And what I've specifically talked to the developers is that suppose that we will do the placement, and we will do the advertising and so forth, and we'll get our students on the condition that you only rent to PCC students. Because otherwise you will end up with Caltech students in the housing. And it's not like I have anything against Caltech, but we work for PCC. Okay, anybody else? Yeah, Dave?
Yeah, last time we looked into Santa Monica, believe it or not, their cost of living was higher than Pasadena. And that's why they were getting away with charging a lot more.
But what we find is that a lot of students are, and you can speak with Amy Ann about this, a lot of students leave PCC to go to Santa Monica. And they kind of actively recruit. And they recruit our students. And their friends down there recruit their friends here.
And they also have the attractive association with UCLA, at least it's perceived to be that way.
That's also
so it's
true.
Real close, and everyone knows UCLA.
Yeah, but Caltech is right here.
Oh, pardon me.
We have Caltech.
I forgot.
Come on.
Okay. This is another analysis that we did this week. And what I'll do is let me pass it around with its sister chart. Because it'll fold into the next discussion, which is dollar-based budgeting. So the first one is the cost per full-time equivalent student. So these are in thousands. What this shows is that the range, and last time I said that the range was probably a factor of 4, and it's actually more than that. To be completely fair, with the CEC cost per FTS, the trouble with it, and the handicap that CEC has, is that they have a fully separate operation. So when you're running a separate office and a center, then there are overhead costs. So the credits, this is per credit FTS. So they have 90 credit FTES basically in cosmetology. So that's what skews the number. If you were to do non-credit and credit, then it would change that number. But for illustration purposes, what it does show is that social sciences cost per full-time equivalent student is $2,000. And then you can work your way all the way up to health sciences, which is $5,360 per full-time equivalent student. That occurs because largely, you can see on the second chart, which is the students per section. So what happens is that and I kept the color coding the same so that you can see that there's not a true one-to-one relationship. Generally speaking, the orange and red is toward the right and the green generally is to the left. But even then, there are some anomalies. But you'll see that social sciences with 44 student average per section, you would expect that the cost per full-time equivalent student would be lower. You would also expect that with health sciences, often being on the order of 12, you would expect that price would be higher per full-time equivalent student. What it does demonstrate, however, is that there's a big distinction between divisions, some of which are explainable and some of which are probably more difficult to explain.
I can explain mine.
No, I know you can. You wanted to talk, or?
No.
Okay.
She wanted to defend.
You
I just wanted to defend.
At any time.
You want to go on the record that you could explain it.
If you need me to talk, I will.
No, and we talked last time when Tom Berg was here too, that this would occur, because I knew that this was going to happen. I didn't know the exact numbers until this morning when I did these charts. But it shows the trend line, and I think it shows a correlation. Now that becomes interesting, and let me pass this around with the dollar-based budget, which I've talked about, and I briefly discussed it last week conceptually, but now I've actually put some numbers because I worked on that this morning too.
You're certainly the paper king.
That's the least of it. Okay, so the issue here is that within the different divisions, I excluded counseling and I excluded the library because they are also huge anomalies. Obviously, the library is not in the primary business of teaching, and counseling is also similarly not in the business of teaching. They're in the primary business of counseling. So I excluded them. But what you'll see is the full-time equivalent students, if you're going to divide it up, and this is a rough calculation here based on percentages, social sciences would produce 3,544 full-time equivalent students, which would be their share of the overall goal, in this case, 20,942. It happens to cost, in this scenario, $2,320. Therefore, their budget, you do the multiplication, and it would come out to a little better than $7 million. and so on and so forth. So this is, for discussion purposes, it shows the dynamics of how it can work. What this allows you to do is to change some variables. The variables that you can change are what the target number is for full-time equivalent students. Okay, so by way of example, we decided that kinesiology, health, and athletics should, target 1,000 students next year, and that would be their full-time equivalent student target. And at $2,510, that would be $2.5 million. But on the other hand, we decided that we need to juice up English, and we'd like for them to be at 2,000. And their rate is $4,200 per. Therefore, their budget would be $8.4 million. So it allows you to do enrollment management that is directly tied to budget management. It also raises questions that could fairly be asked in terms of why it is that math is less expensive than, say, languages, or English, or business, or whatever. I mean, it allows you to look at these things too for efficiencies. The other thing that it could do is you could lower that number and expect greater efficiency from a certain division. And you could say your number is going to be, we will allow you so much budget and you have to produce so many FTS. So what this shows is the dynamics of how a dollar-based budget system can work and tie planning directly into the budget, which is one of the accreditation standards. So this is different from what I did last week, which was sort of that, I described it as an apple cutter, to where you take a template and you take however much money we have, and then you slice it in different directions and different sizes. So what this does, completely different process, different concept of how to allocate funds. Ed, did you have your hand up? No, Dave did. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not understanding this one. I guess the 23, let's say social science, 3544, the 2320 is based on how many people are in that class. Is that correct?
2320 is, what I did for this occasion is I took their current budget, divided it by their FTS, and came up with a per FTS cost. Okay, so that's a current year scenario.
Okay, so I guess my question would be, like you said, if, say in English for 1742, if you brought that up to another 1,000 to 27, their cost would go down because they're teaching more students. Is that correct? Or will the cost go up because you have to add more classes?
Well, and the answer is multifaceted, because if the efficiency ratio went up, then you can teach more students for the same or less money. If the efficiency did not go up, then it'd be a one-to-one correlation. What it does is it allows people to better manage their own offerings. It means that you have to decide, by way of example, which adjunct teaches which section, because it's possible to optimize the best people for the best section. Right? So you might have a newer, lower paid person teaching a 5-unit section, and you might have a higher paid person teaching a 3-unit section. I mean, what it does is it allows you, and it allows the division a great deal of flexibility in how to attain the goal. But in the end, we set the goal here of saying you will have so many $1 million in order to do whatever it is you're going to do. Enrollment management piece ties in here by creating targets for FTS by division. Sometimes what we need to do is to emphasize a division or to de-emphasize a division. Sometimes within the division you have to emphasize certain courses and de-emphasize other courses. Okay, and what this does is allows a dynamic way of doing that. So this is completely opposite of what I said last week, of a different methodology completely. And then what would occur with the support units is you go through a similar process, and we'd have to come up with a rubric for that. Because obviously in order for a division to teach, well, they need their classrooms, they need them clean, they need them lit. You have to have counselors, you have to have staff and admissions and records and so on and so forth. So you would expect normally that the total division cost would probably be about 60 or so %. 50% has to be in the classroom, but then you have the divisional offices. The managers are included in these numbers, whereas the 50% law does not include the managers. Does that make sense to everybody?
So this is very similar to activity-based costing model?
Yes.
Okay.
Any thoughts? Because if we can resolve some of these issues, then I would like to implement plans to where people actually understand how budgeting takes place.
Yeah.
And that it does not occur in a dark room, smoke-filled room in the back corner.
So this chart, on the right-hand side, that's the current budget for each of those divisions.
Yes.
That's everything. I mean,
Well, and I did make a couple adjustments. In the case of CEC, I took out the high school programs because it was basically for the 95 full-time equivalent credit students. So, okay, I had to make a few adjustments here, but by and large, no.
I'm sorry, Rick. Credit. So you didn't include any non-credit FTE?
Not in this.
Not in that. Okay. Because a big part of what happens to the CEC obviously is non-credit.
No, I know that.
I was going to say.
Yeah. And I tried to make this simple enough for demonstration purposes.
Right.
But I didn't want to create massive anomalies either.
Okay, so
This would have to become far more complex in order to hit some of the nuances that you're talking about. Yeah.
So this is basically CEC represents cosmetology.
The 95 FTS is the 4-credit cosmetology.
So it doesn't include nursing that's over there right now.
No, nursing is health sciences.
Health sciences, we're not CEC.
I didn't say you were CEC. I'm just saying that they're located over there right now. So I was just trying to clarify what this represents.
No, and actually that's a good point because CEC is the building.
Yeah.
Not really
Cosmetology,
the program.
technically, I don't believe is CEC either because we're non-credit. But anyway,
Yeah,
For budget
actually,
purposes,
for whatever
it kind of
reason,
is.
it's the only credit program over at the CEC for whatever reason. It was under Dean Hodges' responsibility.
Before the health sciences moved over.
Before health sciences.
And I should change CEC
Right,
to
exactly.
cosmetology in this scenario.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would clarify.
But that's the way that the budget is written. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to come up with a methodology for how this can work
Right.
and what the advantages are. Dustin?
I have a question. In this scenario, how would the decision to raise or lower the number of FTS per area be decided? Would it be decided by a committee or?
I'm assuming enrollment management would work on that.
Yeah, we would. And also, just going back to that CEC thing again, I want to come back to this. That $1,872,000 is not tied only to cosmetology. That's the total
Yes.
CEC, but it is tied only.
No.
Okay, it's a
And
total
that's what I
CEC
started out
budget.
saying. It's unfair to have done this way.
Okay.
Because you have that whole overhead of the center itself.
Gotcha,
You got the
exactly.
front office staff and the admissions and the records. And
Everything. Yeah, okay. So we'll have to break that out separately, yeah. I'm sorry, Dustin, I kind of missed your question.
I just asked, in this scenario, how would the decision to raise or lower the number of FTS per division be made? Would it be made by the academic senate, by the enrollment management committee? I mean, where would this decision be made?
I suspect that as this goes forward, the enrollment management committee would be part of this. But again, it all would play back to the completion agenda and the strategic the enrollment management strategic enrollment management principles by which we are going forward. So I suspect that would weigh into this discussion as well.
so that people can actually understand, and next year you can predict how it's going to be.
Right. And as Rick stated, we'd get the gold star of all gold stars from an accreditation point of view if we actually did this, because it would be a clear indication of tying planning and budgeting together.
Any other thoughts on this? Because if people are interested, I can develop this further. But I want to do this in order to at least demonstrate what the principle of dollar-based budgeting is. What do you think? Keith?
Well, from a cost-effective standpoint, it seems like we should be offering more classes in
math.
In math, yes. Well,
and
it's
English.
costing less. I mean, we get more for a dollar with more math classes than some other.
But what it also shows is that if you were to tie this in with the other charts, to the extent that you end up with large group instruction, and social sciences does that, you end up with precisely what you're just talking about, is that it is possible to serve more students with less money.
Yeah. And the higher education industry for decades has been based on the notion that the higher enrolled classes subsidize the lower enrolled classes, and that every institution has lower enrolled classes, capstone classes, health science classes, everything that we've got to do that are much more expensive. So you always have to offer a certain percentage of high enrolling classes in order to subsidize those that you must have for the academy, if you will, and for the student needs, and figure out a way to balance it. And that's part of the challenge here. And that's why we're now talking in terms of enrollments and not sections. That chart that Rick's holding up again here, it's really the number of students you can get in each section and how efficiently can you manage that, which is why we're talking LGIs and all these other things more.
Well, this is the classic case that you can
classic example.
Save money and serve more students.
Right.
Without compromising the quality of education.
And the more we can do that, the more breadth as an institution we can offer.
Sure.
Now, in speaking about being more efficient with how we serve our students, I'd like to ask members of the Academic Senate that are here where we are in terms of non-closing numbers and movement in that in regards to efficiency.
Normal closing
numbers.
Well, you got president and vice president here.
So
I'll let Edward speak first.
Well, first, as a reminder, the NCN's normal closing numbers are set by the CNI committee.
Yeah.
And as that process goes forward, what happens is that a faculty member proposes a new course or revises an existing course, and really looking at the course content, looking at the material that's taught in that class, and looking at publications from colleagues in the same discipline at other schools and so on. They set a number, the normal closing number, with the idea of promoting the greatest number of students who can successfully complete that class. So they come up with, say, 30 or 35 or whatever that number is. So I would say that at the present time, those are the types of factors that they're looking at, pedagogical issues. I don't think they're thinking in terms of efficiencies or cost, quite frankly. And that they have not been directed at this point, I think, to take those factors into consideration.
I can speak to what happened in my division. We found out that we were being allowed to discuss it, so we had a couple meetings in our division about our numbers in English 1A, 100, 400, 1B, and 1C, for example. We did some reading on research about best pedagogical practice for those particular courses, what was best serving students. We had a very passionate debate in those meetings. Then we took a vote based on the discussion and decided to, for example, lower our number from 30 to 25 in English 1A. And there was a lot of research. I think there was like a bunch of essays that were brought into a meeting once, a lot of research to back up that lowering of a number from 30 to 25, that students succeed better, that the instruction is more fruitful, and students actually can communicate better with one another. But again, we had a very long discussion. I think it's already gone through CNI at this point for my division.
The challenge, of course, is you get to serve fewer students.
That's the problem.
Right, and in the discussion in CNI, that was the topic. To the extent that we lower the NCN in any course, particularly like English 1A, which is so many sections that we have to mount for English 1A, it means that it limits the breadth that we might be able to do as an institution, because we have to invest more of our FTES resources to serve more students. But we mitigate that by being more efficient in other areas, offering more LGIs to the extent that we can, and having online sections that might be LGIs as well, and just coming up with other ways to sort of serve students in other ways. But the argument has always has to be predicated on academic quality and integrity. That's the business that we're in.
But here's the other way of doing that for English, is that's fine for English to do, but what they'd have to do in order, with a dollar-based budget, then they would have to do exactly what you said earlier. Then they have to mitigate that and subsidize it with higher enrolled sections.
Exactly right.
Because, or you end up finding somebody else who will do it for you. But the bottom line is, as long as we can't print money, we already know that 50% of our money is going to go into the classroom. The issue now is how many students can we possibly serve?
And this provides an incentive to the faculty and the deans to think more creatively about different modalities and different ways in which they can offer services. Now, Rick, I don't know if I may have missed this, but at one point in time, we were actually talking about another little of incentive process, that if we had a dollar-based budget concept or this kind of budget concept, that to the extent that a division was efficient, they might be able to withhold. In other words, if they had an FTES target, and they had a full-time equivalent faculty target or a budget target, and to the extent that they were able to come in under budget, that they might be able to keep a little bit of the difference.
Well, and that was what we were talking about with that first chart, though.
Yeah, exactly. Because that was the concept, too, is that the division would have a further incentive so that they could buy, more skulls and more cadavers or whatever they might need, more supply items and things, and replace equipment by having a little bit of an incentive to hang on to some of that money to do the things that they can do internally without having to go through, 5 vice presidents or whatever to get approval to do it.
Right. Dwayne, and then Dave.
I guess this comes back to a little bit of Alex's point, and I wanted to end the whole NCN things. While I've always been very intrigued with activity-based costing models and how you how you can drive costs down, because I would be much more interested in how quickly could we go from it takes 24 months to get through versus it taking 18 months. And if we think about NCNs and strictly it's just one academic division versus how do you get this cross-curriculum kind of initiative where a student can accomplish the results of 2 different courses because there's the pairing of different academic disciplines to cover the same kind of material in the same period of time, so that now I can get through my course and I can get my diploma in 18 months. And I just wonder sometimes as we think about that and how we look at our costing model, is that there should be some real rewards when you start looking at how do you drive the student costs down to as a very low number. That I think has another kind of economic benefit to the institution as a whole, is that we can grow some of these programs and drive the cost down for students and volume up. I think has some merit in itself as well. But as we then begin to look at numbers like NCNs, when you have that type of cross-curriculum collaboration, which I think is very exciting, there's a number of institutions doing that. How well can we integrate that within our instructional model here? I think it has real benefits to the students, and that's, I guess, where I would be interested in that focus.
Dave?
Yeah. Did you say you'd break this down a little bit more? Like, let's say in social sciences, you're going to have some fixed costs, and that's how many permanent teachers we have, versus adjunct faculty and how many classified people are in there. So those are going to be actually the permanent, and the classified is going to be fixed costs. And then the only thing you can really play with is the adjunct.
Well, no, that's not entirely true, though, because even within the full-time, there are efficiencies to be had. But what my personal preference is not to get into that level of detail for us, because we'll be in the weeds forever. And the reality is that some of those issues are so complex. The distinction between CEC's regular programs and health sciences, they're in the same building, but the requirements are so unbelievably different that for any one of us to understand that is going to be challenging. But what I would propose is that if we set targets and we allow certain dollars, and then we allow the divisions to knock themselves out, but come up with the best way of doing this. You only have so many dollars, and you've got to produce so many FTES. One thing you can never do is to not hit the FTS number. You must at least hit that number, or you end up getting dinged, because for every FTS that you don't hit, you're dinged by $4,564. But I don't want for this to be central planning. I want for as much planning to occur within the divisions and the departments as possible, and that the overarching strategies and the targets for FTS by division would be set by enrollment management or whatever. We would end up here setting the budgeted amount. And that would be in consultation too with enrollment management, because certain divisions can be emphasized or de-emphasized. And then we'll end up coming up with a number. Here's the bottom line number that we're going to hit. So if next year our budget is $103 million in the unrestricted general fund, okay, we can do some quick math and I can develop an Excel model that will do this and just spread the numbers. And then here's your target. Then what happens is that we go to the division deans and the department managers, and we say, here's your target, here's the money, work it out. And allow that creativity to occur at that level. And what it does is it allows for everybody within the department to be a part of this process. And I don't know how to make this any more transparent than to do that. Because heretofore, with our current system, it is completely incomprehensible.
I defer to Danny in terms of the details of this, but I just wonder, I mentioned last week the issue where a class will start, say, at 30, and you'll have, by the week 9 or 10, you have 7 students dropping out. And of course, that's 7 more people that we could have served. I just wonder if there's a way to incentivize faculty by their own choice to willingly, for example, instead of starting with 30, starting at 35 or starting at 37, and with the anticipation that number is going to drop back down to the number that it was supposed to start with. But there's always, you get a really good class and everybody stays, there would be an incentive for that kind of situation that you know you're doing a little bit of extra work. I'm thinking of English, for example. If I had to grade 7 more papers, that's a lot of work. So there will be an incentive to do that, but of course we could serve more students and still balance our numbers at the end, and the number of students that are completing the course in the end.
And I think part of what we have to do is to have 25 Live tie into that system, so that if a faculty member is willing to add students, you know, when I was teaching, it's like, if there are seats in the room, knock yourself out, have the seat and I'll add you. And that was fine. And if it was 8 students, that was fine. There's a seat there. Okay, now some people don't want to do that for any number of different reasons. But to the extent that a faculty member is willing to do that, I think we need to come up with a system to encourage that. Because if we have a seat that's available and there's a student who wants to sit there, we need to find a way of matching that chair with that student.
If I can speak to that also, the only thing that then makes that a problem, as I understand how we get reimbursed by the state, is if those 7 students that don't drop until after the census has taken place, and then they drop out, and you know, and I think we have to return the money.
No, and let me be. We did talk about that last week.
Then I don't understand it at all.
But let me explain that, because that is a common misperception. And what we talked about last week is that the FTS cap is the target that we must minimally hit. Okay? If you hit that number, the state will reimburse you per their promise. Late, but they'll reimburse you. Whatever you shoot past that makes no difference in any way, in any regard, at all. There is no penalty, at all. The issue is that's on the revenue side, and you're not going to get more revenue for doing it, because they're going to pay you at the cap rate. The expense side occurs through the number of sections that we teach, because each section has an instructor. Okay, but there is absolutely no necessity to try to hit your FTS number, that your enrollment number, with your FTS cap number. As long as you minimally hit the number, you know, you can shoot past 10,000. It makes no difference. The problem is that when you're doing the 10,000, you're going to have pedagogical problems.
Yeah, you know, pedagogy. And just to be clear here, the traditional and normal, for lack of a better term, way of managing this is to go 2 to 4% usually over your workload, whatever that cap is that you've got. And also, to be very honest about it, although there's no dramatic extra cost, there's some incremental cost to having students, additional students. You know, you've got to buy restroom supplies, you've got to buy more laboratory stuff. And there's some expense, but it's a marginal expense, right? So now what we're basically saying is that, and the chart that Rick had and we had last week that showed the amount of enrollments based upon the cost and how we were able to sort of maintain somewhere between 150 and 180,000 enrollments over the last 8 years, while our budget went from around a high of 123 million down to 103 million, shows that you can do that. And you can do that by using some of the money in reserves, which we did, and you can also you can do that even while your income is going down, but you can't do it forever. So now what we're basically saying, we want to be much more efficient with the FTS that we generate. We want to get as many people in those classes as possible. Some of these are workload or working condition items, so they have to be negotiated at the table, and that's part of where we are right now. It's one thing to say we're going to put as many students as we want in these chairs. It's another thing to be able to do that on the basis of the contract that we've got, and that's part of what we've got to work through. I just want to be very clear about that. We just can't snap our fingers and say let's do that because we're going to incur expenses if we do that. Now, if we declare those extra, well, I don't want to get further because it's a negotiation item, but it's just not as easy as what we're saying.
I think that one of the best things that we can do is have a well-managed LGI program. And I'm the biggest fan of LGI as long as everybody understands how it works and it just doesn't run
right.
chaotic.
And the right interventions are put in place to make sure that it's quality LGIs.
Exactly. And the other thing I personally also believe is that the faculty should have as much freedom and latitude in managing their own classroom and the size of the classroom. That if what you said is, that by the middle of the semester, 7 students are going to be gone, because that's just the way it is. And if you start heavy, you'll end up right. And a lot of times that happens fairly quickly.
Yeah.
But I think that rather than creating some rule about it, to the extent that the latitude can be given to you, then you can be a part of the solution to the problem.
And that may be exactly what the agreement ends up saying when we're done with it, is that we just give that, the classroom management responsibility, we just give to the faculty member and call it a day.
It's a complex issue, but I think there's a way out. And I think that's what all the data is starting to show, is that we can do what the students want, which is to serve as many as possible. And we can do what we have to do, which is to throttle back on the expenses to match the revenues. Dan?
I agree with most of what you said, but you said something about spending reserves to do all this, and our reserves have gone from 14.5, and again, I'm not trying to, I just want to make it clear, because I think the perception out there and what has been put on the web and things that have been promoted is that we have used our reserves up, and they have gone from 14.5 million in 2007 to 19 million today. So we have more reserves, and we have had excesses at the end of every year of between $5 and $6 million. So I know I've said it before, but I just think it bears repeating, because the perception out there is that we've used up all our savings. I mean, that's what was actually said. And I don't know what savings they're talking about, but we haven't.
So let me just address the overall concept is, I think that there would be no one who would disagree that we have been running rather inefficiently. And to the extent that the efficiencies over the past number of years could have been corrected, the reality is that our reserves would have been significantly higher. So the fact is that we have been burning through our potential reserves, and what we're being forced to do now is to live at a lower standard because of what the state's requiring because of its budget, which forces us into a greater sense of efficiency. And I think that is fair to say, and I think that we would have had more money left over had we been running more efficiently. Now we don't have a particular choice in doing it, and therefore I think that the silver lining in this budget cloud is that we're going to end up coming out better than we were before.
$13 million is what we've spent in overcapped students. Just isn't, that's not the case.
Well,
I mean, I don't know what the amount is, but it's nowhere close to that.
It happens, and one of the things, Danny, is that when you're looking at this chart and you're talking about 45 sections costing $120,000 versus 14 costing $54,000, this is an example, and this is a great microcosm for what our issue has been. This is not unique to this one semester. Okay, now this is $70,000 roughly. We could have been doing this in a lot of places where we offered the sections that the students needed more for less money. And I think that to the extent that each division gets this point, the net effect is we will do exactly what everybody, and I think everybody in this room wants to do this, which is to serve more students with less resources coming to us. And irrespective of what happened in the past, I think that we're all unified in that. And I think that one of the messages that needs to come from this committee is there's not one person in here who doesn't want that. Now, we all have different perspectives and we come from different constituencies, but that's actually what makes this process stronger. Because I can count on the fact that you're going to raise certain issues.
Well, when I think there's disinformation, yes. I mean, I just
But it's not
think
disinformation.
Well, it's not accurate, and so again, I agree with you. We need to be more efficient. I'm not opposed to most of the ideas that are being presented here, but I don't like the way we're getting there in saying, look, we spent $13 million on students for over cap when we know it's nowhere close to that. I don't know if there's any way to figure it out. But we didn't actually spend 13. That's what we would have got paid if we were over cap. Well, if you're over cap, you never get paid for over cap. So you're never going to get funded for over cap. So that's what we would have received if you get paid for every student, but you never get paid for every student. So to put out information like that, that's all I'm saying. I don't want to make a big deal here, but I'm just saying.
Too late for that.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, as I think this is really a good time to say this, the really great thing about this year's Budget Resource Allocation Committee activity and the redesign of the shared governance process is that we are having these very, very detailed civil conversations on a weekly basis where we can all represent whoever we represent, but the vibe is just very good. It's a very positive vibe. And you've said things, Danny, and I've said things, and we're having a good conversation. So I think as long as we stay on the positive side of the trend and not slip back into, and I think you just said it, Rick, I think we're making good progress as an institution, and that's really important.
Well, it's also helpful that we have a common enemy.
Right. It doesn't hurt.
We
That's
have a
right.
budget that just really sucks.
Yeah.
Okay, and we have a common goal, which is to serve as many students as well as we possibly can. And there's not a single person in this room who disagrees with that. Now, for me, part of the shame is that, getting this message out, and if we had more students here to understand that we are actually working on this and we will resolve it. And we are going to come out of this being a better institution. And I don't have any doubt of that at all. And, it's a process that if we assume that everybody's in here for the right reason and everybody's out here to do something very positive, I think that the process becomes stronger and stronger. Because, nobody's trying to pull one off on somebody else and everybody knows where everybody's coming from. Danny's going to expect me to say certain things, and chances are I'll probably say them. And vice versa. But in the end, that is what creates the strength. It's not the similarity of opinions that allows for strength, it's the diversity of opinion. Dwayne?
I think what I'm hearing from Danny, though, is, and it's probably similar to in some of what John said over there a little earlier, in that there's clearly some lack of understanding about how some of the meaning behind some of the numbers. I just sit and I think about how many employees we've lost to retirement, and we know that 90% of our budget is tied up in salaries and benefits, and so that there's that whole piece of the equation that ends up rolling into what's left over at the end of the year, and then there's these other things that are going on. So I do think that what I hear is not a resistance to things as much as I hear is just a need for better understanding about the numbers and how they come together. So we'll get there, I think.
Is there general consensus that the dollar-based budget concept is worth pursuing as a methodology? So managers are saying yes, classified?
Me, I don't think so. I don't see where it's going to actually benefit the budget. I mean, it's fine, Danny, to see how much, social sciences is spending, but are we going to actually really be able to change that?
Oh, yeah.
What are we going to say? Was they going to have less, and then what are they going to do? Cut a teacher?
Okay, but Well, and you've got a division dean sitting beside you. I think it allows the division deans more flexibility in creating a dynamic process where you can hit targets with certain resources.
I have no control.
But she can do that anyway.
No, I can't. I have no control over the budget, really. Well, I shouldn't say none, but I do not have the kind of input and control that as Rick had so eloquently put it earlier, it takes the signatures of 6 vice presidents. And so just
And we don't even have 6.
Yeah, we only have 5.
Okay.
No wonder nothing gets
There's our problem.
It's stopped at that number 6.
Here's what Barbara's saying is we need one more vice president.
Yeah.
Dwayne said his resume was ready, but he's already one, so unless he wants to take on a second. It takes so long, when you think you have a solution to a problem, and then you have to wait and vet it through so many different levels in order to get the permission that you know that you're going to get, because there's no argument against the logic. So, for example, we had a person who left our division, and rather than fly that position, I have a better way to fill it. I'm now covering more lab hours utilizing graduates of our program who have not been able to find a job yet, but are licensed RNs. They're working now with the students in the laboratory, so there's, instead of one person with the students in the lab, there are 4 people with the students in the lab covering 64 hours instead of 40 hours, and I did it for saving the district $28,000. Did I really have to wait and get permission to do that? So if I had this dollar cost budget and I had that flexibility with, somebody says, Barb, you have $5 million. Do what you need to do to run your programs. And then I'm able to decide how that money gets allocated or how I'm able to cover things. It would just run that much more smoothly, and I wouldn't have to wait then while the students wait. So the students wouldn't have to be waiting for the person to open the lab because we didn't have a person.
Students?
I'll say that from a fiscal standpoint, I think I am comfortable moving in this direction. In as much that it allows for flexibility within the divisions, I think it is a good idea moving forward.
Danny or Dustin?
Do you want to go first?
I'm willing to explore it. I just don't know how it's going to impact things
I don't know either.
pedagogically. So,
But what I'm willing to do is to develop it further and to see what I come up with, and then I'll bring it back.
I would have the same thing. I think it's worth looking at and just bringing details, and then we could discuss it further after that.
Okay. Now, we're running out of time, and I hate ending meetings late, as you all know. The last one is the new or replacement full-time positions for this year. And what we're trying to do is to free up as much as we can without breaking the bank or without having the wheels fall off the bus here. So this outlines the positions and the unit membership for those positions that we're working on. So you'll see that the 22 faculty we hired at the beginning of the year. Campus police chief is currently underway. That should finish the entire process fairly soon. And that these are the positions, the next batch of positions that we really need to have in order to either continue to function or to continue the transformation.
And can I just make one point on the distance ed technologist / developer position? That position will also be supporting a great deal of classroom technology as well, of face-to-face classroom technology as well.
Which one? Sorry.
The one that's under educational services is the middle one, distance ed technologist / developer. It's also going to be supporting classroom in a very significant way, lecture capture and all kinds of other things that we're doing for the face-to-face classes right now.
Okay. Anything else? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No. You want to discuss the chart, Danny, from last time?
Yes.
Can I carry that over to next time? Is that all
Well,
right?
if you could bring next time how we're actually,
Okay.
what percentages, like break this down for this year and the last 2 years, so we could kind of see what percentages
Yeah,
you've
it's
been
going to be
spending.
close to that, but let me see what I can do.
Okay, that would be good.
Okay. That was just a, no, I'm not going to say what it was. I was going to say squeaking and wild, but
Give them something to do.
the rest of it I won't.
Yeah, on that also, especially the scheduled maintenance, and what the actual state has given us in scheduled maintenance
Oh, no,
funds.
that's easy, that's zero.
And then the, okay.
They haven't given us scheduled maintenance, I don't think, for 4 years.
But we're still funding it, is that correct?
We're funding it with district money, because we're not a choice.
Okay. And
Okay.
the other thing is that you were mentioning about 10 custodians that you're
And
going to, but I
and-
don't see that on the list.
You don't see that yet on the list because my promise was to fund that out of electricity savings. So that still will occur.
Okay. And I also see the facilities director interim, I thought you were going to keep that on as a, free
At a
gratis.
certain point, that has got to stop.
And is there a reason why everything's in black?
Yeah, because I like it.
It takes up a lot of heat.
I am fine with everything being in block.
We want to have a vote on, no, Danny,
Yeah,
before we
I just
leave.
got a couple more things. I know the meeting's going long here, but we're not quite
Not
to
yet.
2:30. On the capital outlay funds, could we get the current expenditures in those capital outlay funds from 7101 to 7117 for this year and for the
Just
last
a
2 years?
Those are the cost centers?
All those, all those cost centers. Could we get where we are currently, what we spent in those this year, and then what we spent in those categories for the last 2 years? Then I wanted to go, we don't have time.
Just one sec. Marie,
Sorry.
can you get Anthony to do that?
I can get that.
It's just Fund 41.
You want past 2 years and declare that you're done?
This year and the last 2 years, so
Yeah.
09, 010, 10, 11, and then.
2 years prior
Yeah, for all those cost centers and under capital outlay.
in current year. Okay.
Okay, and?
The self-insurance fund, we don't have time to go through it, so I would like to walk through that self-insurance fund because I don't think I'm understanding it correctly. So it's pages 585 to 587.
Which are the fund numbers?
Well, it's cost center 4306. It's the dental insurance, fund number 63. Sorry.
63.
Yeah. So I want to walk through that so I can understand that
Okay.
because that's 1.3 million of what we have to find for next year. So
30 seconds, Dan.
Okay, I got 30 seconds. Okay, were you also aware that they're changing the signs in the C building from English division to department and the language division to department today? Somebody said they were changing the signs up there. Did you know that?
Well, Jamie Flitter would have done that, but I didn't.
I actually saw them changing as I walked in about 7:15 this morning.
What does it say?
I didn't know what it says though, but I would imagine that's just a mistake, right?
Does it really say department and not division?
Well, I didn't see it, but somebody called me this
Well,
morning.
Dustin's in the.
Yeah, if it.
I didn't see it this morning when I walked by.
Well,
honestly, that wasn't.
I think, but I think it's fair to. I think it's fair to.
Right to my box.
Well, it gives the perception that
Right.
things are decided before they're decided. you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
do
I think
things
it's fair
like
to say that is not the case. That
That's
was a
true,
mistake.
that wasn't the intent.
Yeah, we'll get them down.
I'll beat her head on a rock.
I'll check when I walk back over.
Okay, anything else? It is 2:30, so we are adjourned. Oh,
Well, those are adjourned.
good. Is there a second? Yes. Is there any objection to adjourning?
So,
Good.
I object, yes.
You're just getting warmed up.
Right?